Hello and welcome to the very first live stream for Moon Chicken Productions. Yay. Obviously, as you could see, this live stream is going to be focused on the Beastiary content, and well, as I mentioned, it is a test, so basically this is going to be a little bit buggy, perhaps a few glitches, maybe a bit of embarrassment on my part, but for the most part I hope you guys enjoy it. The content I decided to focus on today was mostly going to be about the recent comments that we've gotten. This was mostly because between the previous Codcast and now I've not had much time to produce anything, and I would rather try and do the gosh, what was it called? The Fantastic Beasts video live stream thing when I'm a bit more prepared. This, as I said, being a test, is just to get all the kinks out of it. That's actually part of the reason why there was very little warning about this, because I myself didn't know I was going to be doing this until, well, about 30 minutes ago. Simply because I didn't know when I was going to have all of the assets sorted out. I suspect that there will be some audio bugs in the tests that I have done. There have been quite a few. I'm having a bit of trouble with the noise gate. I've got quite a few things going on over here, and I don't want my microphone to pick any of that up, simply because it will be very annoying. So, in the comments during this live stream, or afterwards, or whatever, let me know if there was anything that we can fix, and, well, I'll get right on it. It's a little bit fiddly. I'm not particularly used to this system, but, yeah. Anywho, straight to work. As you can see right in front of you, I've got a comment and a weird little picture. The comment comes mostly from, well, the previous Codcast video by Darren Wielden, a person who has been speaking with me quite often. I do really appreciate your attention, Darren. Be sure to leave more comments, etc. Darren was asking about the difference between wyverns and dragons, and I gave him a very general answer. I wasn't entirely complete with it, but I thought it would be an interesting topic to mention as a start to this. So, what is the difference between a wyvern and a dragon? Well, initially, not very much. You see, both are rather large lizards, both are mythical creatures, and there's very little that we can initially see. If you look at the picture over here that I've put up on the screen for you, you'll see this is the original depiction of a wyvern in an old Welsh manual, I think it is. And the main difference you'll see is that it has 2 legs as opposed to 4. Now, this is very much of an arbitrary distinction, because some dragons are depicted as having 4 legs, some are depicted as having 2 legs. And I do mention this to Mr. Wielden. Sorry, I'm getting everything all confused already. I mentioned this to Mr. Wielden, but it is one of the main differences. Obviously, dragons have 6 limbs, usually. They have a pair of wings and 4 legs. But again, some dragons, like the here's a heraldry. Some dragons, like the dragon that St. George kills over here, is actually, well, you know, 2-legged. So how can we tell the difference between the dragons and the wyverns? Well, to be honest, there really is not much of a difference. It depends on how you want to construct your fantasy. Now, some people will be a little bit particular about how they define a dragon or how they define a wyvern, etc. But we mustn't forget that these creatures are fantastical, and they quite literally are whatever we say they are. I sort of allude to this in my reply to Mr. Wielden by saying that if you want to, you can have a wyvern be the juvenile form of a dragon, or a male form of the dragon, or even the female form if you want. It's really up to you. The main point here, though, that I do want to really focus on is that It is fantasy. As much as we have fun with these things, and as much as we might like this, we cannot lose sight of this one important aspect. Oh, lovely. Someone's appeared on the comments. Oh, hello, Softness, Savannah. It's good to see you in the chat. I'm having, as you can see, a bit of a test live stream. I don't know about the delay on this, but hopefully it's not too excessive. That's a delightful smiley face. I don't actually have any of your comments present here, Savannah, so I hope it's not too much of a trouble. So yeah, basically going back to the dragon. Oh, dear, I'm waffling so much. Ah, yes. Well, thank you. Yes, so back to the waffling. The dragons. Fun things. Really do enjoy them. And I actually have a few examples of dragons over here. There we go. There's another St. George dragon. Oh, Synthal. You really love dragons. You know, actually, the dragon video is a lot... no, sorry, not is a lot. There are many popular dragon videos on YouTube. Quite a few people enjoy them. And I honestly thought that my own video would not get that much attention, simply because, well, you know, there's so blooming many of them. So I was quite surprised to see how popular it was. But yeah, so yeah, back to that. We can see there's a little picture of a dragon, another St. George image actually. So yeah, notice again it has only 2 legs. So this Christian myth, which ostensibly is based on the original dragon, looks like a wyvern. An interesting point is the dragon is no, not the dragon, the wyvern is poisonous, which reminds me of the basilisk, another very popular kind of creature. We've got a video of the basilisk if you want to check that out. So do keep that in mind. Obviously a dragon would breathe fire or some kind of magical stuff, but the wyvern is poisonous. If you guys in the comments have anything you'd like to add, I'll address them ASAP. As you can see, it's quite a slow chat today, so... Well, not today, it's just quite a slow chat full stop. I've not done one of these before, so... Yay. Incidentally, I hope you don't mind me addressing you by the Patreon name, Softness. I just realized that perhaps I ought not to be doing that. Yeah. Just, I figured, since there's the connection and whatnot. Oh, I've got one more cool image. There's a dragon with 3 heads. So, you know, does that count as a dragon? Is this something that we could say is... like, not a wyvern or something? Because the 3 heads would ostensibly say that it's a completely different creature. In fact, this is very weird for any kind of animal to have, say for amphibians or fish. Okay, cool. I'll call you Savannah. And I imagine that this would not be very biologically possible, the 3 heads, because, you know, you're essentially running 3 brains. Now I'm going to use the human brain as an example because I'm not too familiar with animal brains, but your brain on average weighs about, let's round it up, let's call it 2 kilograms, and it consumes like 16% of your body's oxygen. So imagine an animal this big with 3 brains. That's, the oxygen requirements would be massive. And never to mention the heart. The cardiac muscle is a very powerful muscle. And the main selling point of cardiac tissue is that, well, it doesn't get tired, but the oxygen point is kind of a thing. It consumes a huge amount of oxygen, absolutely massive. This is what you must give in exchange for that, so, yeah. Oh, interesting. Interesting. It's called Gornyechi. Sorry, it's been a while since I studied Russian, so I'm a bit rusty. Multiple hearts and lungs. That's actually a good idea. But my question would then be, where do they keep the... Well, you know, not do they keep... Where would it be... Where would it be located, these organs? giraffes have very powerful hearts. I don't think that they have multiple hearts, just incredibly powerful ones. And as a consequence, they don't actually lie down because the blood pressure is way too high. And that would kind of kill them. So, perhaps. I imagine solving the pressure would be very difficult with 3 hearts or several hearts, more than 1 heart, because we use a single heart with 4 valves, but the systems, the various systems for each of the valves, each of the chambers in the heart, are directly related to you know, that particular chamber. So we don't have several chambers working on a single arterial system. And I imagine trying to keep the blood pressure flowing, no, not blood pressure flowing, blood pressure decent would be a very difficult thing to do. And yeah, so that would be quite difficult. Although I suppose you could manage it with rather strong muscles and rather adaptive muscles around the arteries. That could work. Back to the comments. Zimir Gornich. Okay. Again, sorry, it's been a while and my tongue is kind of wrapped around Japanese. I do run into Russians occasionally and I have very broken conversations with them, but their Japanese is a lot better than my Russian, so I end up speaking to them in Japanese rather. Okay, so giraffes have extra hearts and lungs in their chest. Oh, you mean neck, extra hearts in their neck. Okay. Oh, lungs in their neck. I see what you're saying. Okay. Sorry, it took me a second to pass that. Well, you know what? Let's quickly go. Let me check. Giraffe physiology. Let's see if this is in fact the case. I'm just going to quickly pull up some images for us to look at, and I'll transition it shortly. Browser. There we go. So this is what I'm looking at right now. Let's take a bigger look at this. It says, here's a giraffe. It has a heart and a rather long vagus nerve, large carotid artery. I don't know. It doesn't seem to have much in the way of additional lungs or additional hearts. But I don't know if there's any other systems. This is a very very basic image. Let's see other giraffe physiology. What are these? No, this is just tracking the pressure on the jugular vein. Let me just take a closer look at this image. Extending neck upward, giraffe, intricate valves and jugular veins. I'm looking mostly at photos, by the way, just because I don't want to... let's close this. Because I don't want to... well, I don't want this to be uninteresting. But I wonder why they draw this the jugular vein in this manner. I wonder if these are not valves to perhaps control the blood pressure, because these look like gosh, I forgot the name. It's a type of sphincter that controls the blood flow in most arteries to prevent them from blood from flowing backwards, and these look like rather prominent ones. I forget the name of them, but this is probably what you meant by hearts in the neck. So not exactly hearts, but a rather complicated system that does function in a similar manner. And don't worry, you're not a liar if you think that, you know, if you've got the wrong information. Being incorrect and lying are not the same thing. But again, as you can see here, it's not perhaps that it was additional hearts, but a rather intricate system of valves and releases to prevent blood from flowing backwards and to maintain pressure. So, yeah, that's a thing. Very interesting. I didn't know that about giraffes, but in hindsight, I realize I should have probably, you know, expected this outcome. So thank you for that. Thank you. And yeah, that's dragons for you then. I do have one more image that I wanted to share because this is oh no, not this. Oh wait, I forgot about this image. Yes, here we go. This is a Chinese dragon, and we consider them to be dragons despite the fact that they don't have wings. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that they do fly, but this is with magic and stuff, so yeah, quite interesting. I wonder what the physiology of one of these things would look like, because it's a rather large animal, and it does rear itself up and generally move like a snake. Indeed, I suggest that these are derived from snakes in the dragon video. Something like this might actually use a completely separate set of hearts, but then again, it just could use more valves, huh? Yes. It certainly does look like a flying snake. What was the one? Falcor. Yes, the luck dragon in Neverending Story. As for gliding, though, I don't know, because they would then have to probably live very high up. Perhaps in a mountain or something where they can sort of launch themselves off of. For the longest time, it was thought that dinosaurs, well, not dinosaurs, pterosaurs, such as, well, was Archaeopteryx a pterosaur? I can't recall off the top of my head, but it was thought for the longest time that a lot of pterosaurs, and in particular Archaeopteryx, a dinosaur, was only capable of gliding, despite having fully developed wings. But they just thought that they weren't capable of powered flight. In fact, let me see if I can bring it up. Archaeopteryx. Yes, here we go. Let me quickly transition back to my browser window. And yeah, there you go. So here is an Archaeopteryx. A very stereotypical kind of creature. A lot of the images of dinosaurs that you see generally like to demonstrate this bird. Why? Because it has feathers. If you look at the rock formation around here, this pattern indicates that there are feathers, which was quite weird. Of course, well, quite weird at the time when we discovered this, but subsequent to that, we find out that dinosaurs actually had feathers just in general, and yeah, so this became less surprising. We thought this was a transitionary animal, but it might be really big. It might be just that you know, feathers evolved a lot earlier. So that's a thing to remember. Yeah, Archaeopteryx for you. Here's an artist's rendition of the creature. Archaeopteryx. Looks like a scary bloody chicken. How people thought that these creatures flew was that they would climb to the tops of trees and then just sort of glide down, which is kind of useless if you think about it. You know, what purpose could that serve? Another thing was that a lot of the coastal pterosaurs during the Jurassic period were thought to achieve flight or gliding with warm air currents. The Jurassic period was very, very hot, so shifts in air currents would be a lot more expected and a lot more reliable for flying creatures. So, yeah. Yes, scary bloody chicken. Let's see, according to modern paleontology, most dinosaurs known as theropods probably had feathers, as we now call them, proto-feathers. Yeah, for anybody wondering, the theropods include things like, I think it was the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Was that a theropod? List of theropods. The Tyrannosaurus Rex, the various raptors, any of those bipedal carnivores. Theropods. Let's just see. I just want to make sure. Yeah, so the theropods were generally the more scary chickens. So, yeah. Well, yeah, there doesn't seem to be much else that I can look at over here. So thank you for that, thank you. I completely forgot of the word theropod, and I was hunting for it. So it's always useful to have someone who's quite a lot smarter than me. Thank you so much for that, Synthal. Sithal, not Synthal. Anyway, so let's finish off the dragon stuff. Going back to this whole chestnut. I wanted to show you one more picture, which was this. This is a statue somewhere in Norway, I think. That is pretty bloody cool. It's called the Dragon Family, or Family of Dragons. And I just thought that the fact that we would put that much effort into, anyone would put that much effort into a statue like this is just pretty badass. So, yay. Anywho. On to the next part, which was zombies. I hope that I've got my comments sorted out. Hang on, let me just make sure that everything's okay here. Okay, yes, that's it. So, zombies. Joyous Bee. As you can see by the comment that I'm displaying at the top there, the person's saying that zombies don't eat flesh, only ghouls eat flesh, and this is 100% correct. Originally, zombies only ate brains, and in fact, zombies were not, and I say originally, it's not actually originally, the typical zombie ate brains, but a zombie originally was a sort of mindless slave. It's very much connected to voodoo traditions and is not actually a dead person. But with the Night of the Living Dead film, we kind of conflated the zombies and ghouls to a massive extent. Where a ghoul is more of a demon these days, I think a zombie would be more of a walking corpse. The problem is that with culture, it's a bit difficult to put like a really hard line on what is X and what is Y. Especially in this case, where a zombie is something different to every person. You know, some people prefer the slower walking zombies, sort of like, the Resident Evil creatures. Whereas others prefer the more modern versions with the rabies infection, you know, those ones that can run. And actually, in the Night of the Living Dead, if I recall, it's been eons since I've watched this film, but if I recall correctly, the zombies could actually speak. Again, in this film, they were ghouls, but they were, for some reason, we just assumed that they're zombies. And do they actually ever call them zombies in the movie? You know, I should have actually watched this movie before doing the stream, but as I mentioned earlier, it was the stream is a bit apropos. So yeah. Other things about ghouls is that, as I mentioned, they're demonic kind of creatures, probably some kind of brain parasite. You know, perhaps yes, you're mentioning Cordyceps unilateralis. That's the brain parasite that, well, not the brain parasite, the fungus that you're thinking of over there, Sith. Let me quickly see if I can pull it up on my browser. And this is quite an interesting Cordyceps, quite an interesting thing. Cordyceps unilateralis. Let's see what comes up in the images. Yay, that's sufficiently scary. I think we'll show that to everyone. So here's Cordyceps. Let me bring this up a little closer. As you can see, this is a very mushroom-looking kind of thing. This is an ant that has been infected by a fungus that has very limited control over the ant's cognitive systems, but nevertheless does control the ant. What it does is that once an ant is, I suppose, infected, I'm not entirely sure of the verb that we would use for a fungal infection in this kind of case, but whatever. So once the ant is infected, the fungus burrows into the nervous system of the ant and compels the ant to walk up a leaf and, well, sort of just stay there. The fungus then kills the ant, and from this position on top of a leaf, or from wherever the ant happens to be, the fungus continues to spread itself out. As we can see, the control that is exerted by this fungus is very limited. Very, very limited. It just, you know, gives the ant an urge to climb up a tree. I cannot, off the top of my head, think of any diseases that would do something like that, but we do certainly have maladies that compel people to do very odd things. Think of things like obsessive compulsive disorder, washing your hands 3 times, or counting your steps, etc. There's no material value in doing something like this, but nevertheless you still feel you must do it. But that does come from trauma, if I think, usually, or some kind of psychological quirk, chemical imbalances, etc. So we can't really chalk it up to an external thing, but this is definitely possible. I do mention rabies in my zombie video as a potential cause or catalyst for the zombie outbreak, and that is a very easy thing to use. I hate using viri because, well, as I mentioned in the second codcast, it's a very easy solution. You know, it's like, how does this thing work? Well, it must be a virus. Especially the retroviri, which are capable of rewriting DNA. Not entirely successfully, I should say, but they do this. It is a natural way to do it. Incidentally, my word, I was looking at gene editing machines the other day. 10 million yen. God, I forgot how to go. Like $1 million. $1 million for a gene editing machine. A CRISPR gene editing machine. Good grief. I thought that it was going to get cheaper after that, but no. Okay, well, I mean, a CRISPR gene editing machine is very, very cheap compared to the older ones, but my word. There's also a drug called Devil's Breath. I think that can mess around with your mind and make you hyper-aggressive. Well, you know, actually, technically, all drugs can mess around with your mind. You know, some are nervous system stimulants, some are depressants. Think of when you were, well, not when you were, when you drink alcohol, if you drink alcohol, or if you've been on some kind of medication, you can definitely feel that the way you're thinking is colored. You know, it changes your perception quite a lot, and your perception really does kind of inform your decisions. You know, if you're feeling a little bit sad or morose on some day, the rain that happens to be on that day seems to be very moody, and you tend to walk around your house doing very few things. But if you're excited, you know, you enjoy the rain, you go out and splash in the mud and yada 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 yada. So yeah, drugs are an easy way to explain it. And actually, going back to the original zombie, the voodoo zombie is supposedly induced by drugs. So yeah, tetrodotoxin, if I recall correctly, or some kind of cocktail of tetrodotoxin and stuff. Tetrodotoxin is a poison from pufferfish ovaries. It's very interesting because it paralyzes your motor nerves. It doesn't actually stop sensation, so you can still feel what's going on below a certain level of tetrodotoxin. And it can actually slow down your heart quite a lot. And in fact, the original voodoo zombies were supposedly created by a voodoo witch doctor poisoning someone to make it seem as though they were dead. Meanwhile, their hearts had just slowed down to such a point that it was undetectable. And then after people would, you know, bury them and whatnot, the voodoo witch doctor would resurrect the person as a slave. The cocktail that they used afterwards to keep them under, you know, under their control, as it were, is always doubted, but generally the tetrodotoxin tetrodotoxin is generally part of the consensus as something that was used. So yeah, general thing to remember: yay drugs. Well, not yay drugs, but that is a thing. Incidentally, I should mention that. No, wait, no. I'll leave that for later. But going back to the zombies, so here we are with the Night of the Living Dead, and I was talking about ghouls. So ghouls are usually a religious kind of thing. Ostensibly, they're, if I recall correctly, a demon that has possessed a body, or they're, in some cases, they can be just like a devilish individual. It really depends on the culture or myth that you're ascribing to. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Oh, do you know? There, I've now weirdly clicked on everything while trying to look for the stuff. Do you know about the if the zombie bites you, you'll become a zombie thing, and also yay drugs? You know, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have said yay drugs. That's going to seem without the context, that's going to seem a bit odd. In fact, even in context, that seems odd. I retract that whole statement. But yes, as for a zombie biting you, that is potentially a thing. I mean, rabies transmits through a bite, and it's not out of the question that fungus could transmit through a bite. Generally, the juices in our bodies are not very healthy to touch. Saliva is actually one of the more cleaner fluids. I think urine is a little bit more clean, but I should mention that in university I studied predominantly about HIV. I'm African, so that's kind of a thing that we have to do. We have to learn about HIV. And I only recall vaguely that it took... No, it was really a side fact, but it was something about how HIV is really difficult to transmit through saliva alone. There does need to be some kind of oral wound or some kind of damage to the gums, etc. That would generally see blood being, blood being drawn or something along those lines. But saliva on its own is very, very difficult to transmit diseases. However, some diseases like rabies have adapted to saliva, so it's much of a muchness. Anything could potentially transmit through anything. You just have to, well, it just has to evolve for that. So yeah, I don't know about ghouldom or ghoulishness, etc. Because, again, I think this is religious predominantly, but it depends on the type of ghoul that you have. The Wendigo is a type of ghoul, if I recall. Usually these are, gosh, again, I should have probably prepared for this, but a Wendigo, if I recall, was a person who ate flesh. I don't know, maybe any of you guys in the chat know, but it was a person who ate flesh and had become sort of demonic or evil as a consequence of that. The Wendigo was usually in colder climates, and in fact, I think I remember vaguely a story about a group of people who had survived a plane crash that were then afflicted by a Wendigo. And obviously, the plane crash is in the mountains up in the cold north somewhere, and the Wendigo was one of them eating each other. But I think that was more of an urban legend rather than any kind of solid myth, so make of that what you will. But yeah, over here we can see a picture of a ghoul wandering around a cemetery, harassing these women. So yeah, that's pretty much a thing. The Wendigo is a Native American ghoul-like creature that prowl the nights to hunt humans. They are often represented with antlers. Sorry about that, my microphone just conked out. Represented with antlers. Yes, you know what? Let's just go back to the browser and look up the Wendigo. I have all of these things. I have the internet at my fingertips, and yet I don't use it because I'm a freaking idiot. So, yes, here we go. Immediately I see antlers, and there's actually quite a few renditions of this. I wonder what the copyright is going to say about this. Well, not the copyright, but I wonder what people would have to say about copyrights on these things, because technically these images are not actually available for use, but I am streaming, so I wonder where this falls in, but whatever. So here's a Wendigo. This looks like something. Looks like some kind of beast creature, but there definitely are antlers, so make of that what you will. Let's see, here's a corpse Wendigo, a very ghoulish looking Wendigo, and here's another one, and here's another one. I like this theme of it being emaciated. This is very, very interesting. I wonder why. It looks like a deer. I wonder how much influence human beings had on this thing. But again, as we can see, it's emaciated, so yeah, there's that whole need for eating, especially this area around its mouth where, well, you know, it's clearly very hungry. Very interesting creature, very long claws. I imagine this creature would have a very difficult time running through any kind of wooded area, just because it would be ambling quite a lot, and it looks very unbalanced. But it is a fantasy drawing, so let's not criticize it too much. So yeah, the Wendigo, that's a thing too. Next picture. Here are some more ghouls. This is actually a very old image of a ghoul in action. I had made a point to try to remember the story behind this image, but I cannot for the life of me recall it now, and it isn't that important, but again, here's a ghoul. Now, one thing that was mentioned was that someone did enjoy the detail that I went into with the biology and physiology of the zombies. And generally I was talking about how these things are impossible. I did speak about it more or less at length just now, but I mean, look at this image. This thing is... How does it move? We do have to remember that there are mechanical limitations to what can happen in the world, and although this is a fantasy creature, it's still fun to sort of explore it and whatnot. A lot of muscle tissue is missing. The skin's exposed. It would die of infection very quickly, I imagine, and it's generally falling apart. These creatures would not be able to live beyond, I'd say, a few hours, maybe a few days. But I really do appreciate that the commenter was saying that they enjoy that aspect of the videos, because actually that's the thing around which I designed the videos. So just commenter, I shouldn't be that rude. Robert was saying that they really enjoy it. So yeah, this is probably my most favorite part of making the videos, and in fact I often leave it to like the last moment to do that, because it's the cherry on top, and the videos, to make them is, oh gosh, it takes so long. It really does. You know, ostensibly I could do it in a week, and in fact maybe even 4 days, but then I would need a lot of free time. I would basically not go to work then. You know, this would have to be my job, but that's not something I want to happen anytime soon. But yeah, so this is quite a wretched creature. I suppose we could justify this kind of form if, and only if, there was some kind of magic involved. And I do remember your request for fairies, Savannah, so don't worry, that is coming. In fact, that's what I want to discuss with the fairies, so yeah. But again, going back to the creature, I don't want to invoke magic as much as possible, because when magic happens, then, you know, it's basically whatever. You know, whatever you want to have happen can happen. So it's kind of cheating in my mind. I illustrate this a little bit further with this image, where these zombies look like they've been blown to pieces. Oh, okay. The difference between an Asian and European dragon. Well, sorry. Let me quickly. I'm quite boro today. Boro means usually your hair's messed up, but I often use it to to mean confused and whatnot. It's absolutely inappropriate for this sentence. Okay, hang on, let's go back to the dragons for a second. Here we have a European dragon. We see it's standing on 2 hind limbs, and it has a pair of wings and 2 legs. The Asian dragon, however, come on. Oh no, wait, no, this didn't transition. Damn. Okay, there we go. The transition happened. There we go. So, standing on 2 hind legs, got 2 forelegs and a pair of wings. The Asian dragon, however, is very serpent-like, and generally doesn't have any wings. So that's a thing to remember. No wings and 4 legs. Usually 4 legs. I haven't actually ever seen them without, but there you go. That's the difference. This simple difference here. I hope that helps you. Gosh, I'm losing control of this. 125 BBN. I hope that makes sense. So, back to the zombie. You know, that's actually the practical upshot of having rather few people in the chat, is that I can address each of you individually. But I do need to work on my concentration. So yeah, back to the zombie. These people look like they've been absolutely destroyed. So I don't know how they can move. It's quite a thing. I imagine that maybe some muscle tissue could still function throughout all of this, but again, it's just not possible. Anyway, people usually say that Asian dragons are born as snakes and grow up into a large dragon. Actually, in the dragon video, I do mention that, again, that the serpents in Asia probably inspired the dragon. A friend of mine is from Myanmar, and as you can imagine, well, you know, Myanmar, Burma, they worship snakes over there. Well, some shrines and temples worship snakes. And in fact, some of the stuff that I have seen with my friend and from my friend led me to imagine that the snake, the python specifically, was the inspiration for the Asian dragon. It's interesting to note that 2 separate cultures came up with the same creature, but as I mentioned before, with the classification of these things, I sincerely suspect that these are actually completely 2 separate creatures, but our own reckoning and understanding of their features, etc., leads us to sort of dump them all into one thing. So yeah, and yeah, so I hope that makes sense. Moving on. Actually, speaking of dumping and all of that stuff, I wanted to go over to my Leviathan video, and I've got a lot of fun pictures for this. As you can see in this comment, I'm kind of Danelle is asking, why am I lumping all of the creatures into all of these sea creatures into a single classification of the Leviathan? And well, my answer to them was very general. I said that this is just how I see these creatures, and indeed it is quite the case. Over here, this image that we're looking at now, this is the original image of, well, not the original image, but one of the main images related to Leviathan. We've got a picture of God there in the background, who is about to smite Leviathan. And Leviathan's your favorite. Well, you know, is it really a cryptid? I wouldn't imagine, because, okay, I should say, okay, let me, for the sake of anybody who will watch this in future and only listen, Sith says that the Leviathan is their favorite, and the cryptid, is their favorite cryptid along with the dragon. I'm reading like a weirdo today. And I'm not sure if the Leviathan counts as a cryptid, because it is part of religious apocrypha. You know, it's a religious creature. But again, classification of mythical creatures it's much of a muchness. So we can make of it what we will. I don't know, how do you feel about it, Sith? I'll address your comment as soon as it appears on the screen, but in my opinion, I wouldn't consider it a cryptid because it's not a modern myth. It's not something that we're, you know, it doesn't have like it has a long history behind it, and it has this whole myth and lore. Whereas my image of cryptids is that they're more from urban legends, you know, that kind of thing. And as such, the dragon and Leviathan wouldn't be. Okay, so you consider it more of a mythological creature. Well, again, each to his own. If anybody else listening thinks that Leviathan is a cryptid or what have you, go ahead, Osaki ni dozo. It will be quite interesting to see why. Also, what do I think of Jorgamundr? That was the world snake, wasn't it? Ostensibly, Jorgamundr would be Yoda. I always mispronounce that, so please forgive me. I think that it would be more of a, how can I say, sort of a demigod, simply because of its role in the you know, in the whole Norse mythology. But it does have a similar role to Leviathan, so I do mention it in the Leviathan video, actually, and I do consider it a Leviathan. But again, if you want to get into details, I would say it's more along the lines of a deity, or perhaps something similar to the to the Greek Titans. You know, something that is heavenly but not actually a god. And well, my apologies, but this is being recorded, so your spelling will be preserved for all eternity, as well as my shame and constant throat clearing, etc. I'm a little bit, I think I'm a little bit sick today, or getting a little bit sick, so yay, everybody can listen to me being ill. But anyway, so the Leviathan, giant sea snake, generally quite fun. The creature as a whole, I will say, is quite interesting because it comes from the Jewish Apocrypha, and obviously, as we know, this creature originally meant to be whale. That was, I think, the Hebrew word for whale. So, you know, it's not really anything that we can classify other than a whale at the end of the day. But as the legend has evolved and as it has grown and changed, it became different things. You see in a lot of stories like sea monsters, I use the example of the modern rendition, the film of Beowulf, where he fights sea monsters, and these could technically be considered leviathans, but like the behemoth, the Leviathan is a singular creature, and I sort of made this distinction arbitrarily because I defend my use of behemoth as a single creature in the video of the behemoth by just saying, well, you know, legends talk of it as being a single beast, and same for the Leviathan. But in the case of the Leviathan, there's many creatures that can fit into that category, so I intentionally expanded it to include a whole bunch of stuff. And this particular image that you're looking at over here is Jonah and the whale, which is why I was thinking of, well, Jonah and the big fish. Which is why I was thinking of the whale stuff. So, yay, whales. Moving on, here we have a giant octopus. This is from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. If you look carefully at the image over there, you'll see it actually says 20,000 leagues. It's, technically, I don't think this would be a Leviathan, but it is a giant octopus, so I count it as a Leviathan. Does the Kraken count as a Leviathan? According to me, yes. Yes, it does. In fact, I do refer to the Kraken in my original video as a Leviathan. Generally, in modern poetic language, we use Leviathan to talk about just massive sea creatures or massive space creatures if you're into sci-fi. So very easily it could definitely be a type of Leviathan. But again, this is people speaking poetically. You know, it really gets very convoluted when we're not very specific about these things, but because creatures are an artifact of culture rather than being an actual material thing, we can't easily define them. So again, I suppose I should call this the defining what on earth I'm talking about stream rather than the comment stream. So yay. But anyway, so moving on. Oh dear, this is, I just realized this has gone on for quite a while. I hope none of you need to sleep. I know most of you are in America right now, so it's nearly 11:30. So goodbye to anybody that needs to go, but I'm going to finish this off. Hopefully we'll see you later. But continuing, so here is a Japanese myth. This is the sea monk. Technically, this is a kind of ghost. But I count it as a Leviathan. These are just oh, okay, great to hear that. I think the softness has gone off. I suspect that she is American. It's only 8 o'clock. Where on earth are you? What's 8 p.m. So 8 p.m. that would be what, somewhere in Europe? I think, yeah. Gosh, okay, my maths is just completely off. I've moved between so many timelines that I just accept, okay, it's whatever time, wherever someone is. Oh, okay. Oh, so you're on the other side of the US, so 8 p.m. in the US. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on, and thank you for the welcome for the US, by the way, although I'm still actually, right now I'm sitting in Japan still, so that's why the internet is not at all terrible. Anyway, continuing, and that's actually why I mentioned Japanese stuff. Continuing with the stuff here, these are 3 pictures. Well, not 3 pictures, this is one picture of 3 creatures. And the comment, as you can see, is related to Ziz. I suppose that at some point I should do a video on Ziz. Oh, Gutenberg, yes, love to see you. I cannot recall any of your comments, but I do remember your name. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare a list, but of all of the people that frequently comment on my videos to remember who they are, but I do recall you. Usually I do actually have a list of people that do comment, but it's not here, and I've kind of got in brackets the thing that I associate you with. So like the one person is Dragon Guy, and the other person is really long conspiracy writer. I hope that's not at all rude, but it does help me keep track of everyone, especially since well, you know, keeping track of social things is quite difficult. Oh, thank you for appreciating my content. I hope you continue to enjoy it, and yeah, let me know if, as per usual, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see. Hopefully these streams will become a little bit more frequent. I think I've got most of the mechanics down, but I really do want to improve on the aesthetics, so let's see what happens. So far, this is actually what you're looking at here with the aesthetic. This is a I went around looking at a whole bunch of other YouTubers, and this seems to be the most common pattern. The person who started this is a guy who has a blue antelope or something as his caricature or what have you, and I sort of like that for the simplicity, so yeah. Well, the best channel that you know, I don't think I'm that good. To be honest, I could put a lot more work into this channel, and I do, you know, there'll be a weekend where I'm like saying to myself, oh dear, I need to do something for the channel, and just never get round to it. Alas, I'm way too busy and do too many things. That's the problem. And I feel that because I'm not doing more for the channel, it's genuinely not the best. But I appreciate that you feel that way, so thank you for the compliment. Thank you. Shouldn't smack my lips on the camera. No, not on camera, on microphone. Sorry if that destroyed anyone's ears. Going back to this, yes, I'm going to do a video on Ziz at some point, but I was looking at the information because, you know, I kind of have to write about something, and Ziz is a very limited creature. I think what I'm going to have to do is, in the same way that I spoke about the Leviathan, I'm going to have to generalize this to sky things. I might have to mention the rock. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, a rock is a giant bird. Let me quickly pull it up on my browser here, and browser window. There we go. This is a rock. Notice how it's spelled R-O-C. It's sort of basically a giant eagle. Think Lord of the Rings. Now, when I was looking up images for Ziz, the majority of the time I found people suggesting that a rock could be Ziz. I don't know. Oh no, wait, hang on. I think this is pronounced rook, as in, you know, the chess piece, a rook. Let's check the pronunciation over here. Maybe it'll be in the general tab. Rock pronunciation. No, I don't want to listen to a video, but I would like the let's zoom in here just so everybody can see what I'm looking at over here. Rock. Okay, so it's a rock. Rock. Yeah, a rock. Okay, so that's the pronunciation of rock. So yeah, rock is basically a giant bird thing, and it does seem to be a nice stand-in for Ziz. And in fact, I suspect that I'm going to be using a lot of rock images to represent Ziz, so yeah. Oh, going back to the chat, Ziz resembles... yeah, Ziz does resemble a griffin. Actually, if I look up Ziz over here, I think there was an image that I saw of someone, a really old image of Ziz that looked very much like a griffin. The problem with these is that with these images immediately is that I cannot be sure whether it's Ziz or not. A lot of these are very modern renditions of Ziz. And I like to distinguish the modern renditions, like, you know, what we would find in a, well, like a Yu-Gi-Oh card or something, although this is a behemoth. I like to distinguish the modern renditions from the older versions of the creature, and if I recall, it looks like a griffin. Oh, that was the sound of me slapping my head. No, in this image, in the very image that I had for you guys, that I will zoom in now, this looks like a griffin. Yes, over there, that looks like a griffin. So, you're absolutely right. It's a griffin. So, yay. Let's see, what do I do for a living? Do you study history? Oh, as for my job, no, I originally went through varsity predominantly studying history. I did a dual major. History was one of the things. Did psychology and a little bit of biology as a side thing. Psychology is one of my minors. Presently, ever since I ended university, I've been a teacher. So I found that teaching is a very easy way to travel the world, because no matter where you go, people need teachers. So, you know, maybe they need me for teaching history in this country, or teaching languages in that country, or what have you. I've been looking at a lot of other people and a lot of other teachers, and they just generally have an easy time traveling. So the teaching is a lever to travel. So think of it like that. But I suppose I should start thinking of my pension because traveling to all of these countries kind of means that pensions are not very state pensions are not very forthcoming. So I'll probably have to at some point find a way to stop. But a lot of the teachers back home tend to move to other countries, particularly Australia. The UK has a points system that, you know, decides whether someone can move in or not, and it's very difficult to get into the UK with something like software engineering or whatnot, because, you know, a lot of people are software engineers, but teachers, every country needs it. So I'm a teacher by profession, and by additional education, I am a teacher. I wasn't primarily trained as a teacher, but I have, after finishing my degree, trained to be a teacher. So there you go. But as you can imagine, teaching is a very busy job. So I tend to have quite a lot of stuff to do. So yeah, like checking papers, preparing stuff for lessons, etc. Though every year it becomes easier because I can just use old resources. So when you were in high school, or if you are in high school and you see your teacher reusing old resources, don't complain, because that was a weekend that they got to have instead of creating stuff for you. Though as it stands, I have a very bad habit of giving myself a lot of additional work. So I've given most of my students like practice things that they must do, various additional homework activities, and I find that I spend a lot of my free time checking those additional homework activities, and that cuts into my my video making time. So yeah. But anyway, so I hope that answers your question, Sith. That might explain why I have a very wide general knowledge, if you want to go at that. I don't think that I'm particularly intelligent or have any amazing cognitive abilities, but yeah. So yeah, let's see. Do you think Gargoulia is a Leviathan or a dragon? You know, it could be its own thing, I suppose. Because, you know, the problem is we could have sea dragons. It's that is the one thing that I didn't consider. Is a sea dragon a Leviathan or a dragon? Huh. I suppose it would have to be a dragon, because Leviathans would be massive, but a sea dragon would ostensibly be able to leave the ocean, and therefore there is a limit on its size, whereas Leviathans, being in exclusively water creatures, can grow to larger sizes. So I suppose maybe yeah, let's call it, let's for now, let's create the category of sea dragon, and we'll unpack that a little later, unless you have an opinion, Sith. Or maybe Gutenberg, you might have an idea. And as you're saying that, Gutenberg says, I'm familiar with that. My girlfriend studies to be a Portuguese teacher. Ah, from Brazil. Interesting. Ah, well, I'm sorry that you're going to be maybe married to a teacher. My mother is also a teacher, and I grew up in sort of this lifestyle, so I'm quite used to the ins and outs of this, and how everything, you know, the patterns and how everything goes, but not everybody gets it. So good luck, and I hope you have a good go of it. It's not going to be easy, I can tell you. But if you want to move to other countries, go ahead. That you can probably get in on her points or whatever, if that country has points. I should mention that I do intend to go back home at some point. This traveling is not something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life, but as it is for now, it's just, you know, what I'm doing. So yeah. Anyway, I've gotten really off topic. So let me go back and go back to Leviathan. So let's transition. Actually, no, the Leviathan thing was done. So yeah, the person wanted me to do Ziz, and there is Ziz. Finally, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is a little difficult. It's vampires. Now, vampires are, well, I do describe them as being related to Beastiary in the same way as the zombie is. But as you can see from the comment at the top here, I was being asked about Lilith, the first woman, ostensibly. Now, Lilith comes to us from the Jewish Apocrypha. She has been retroactively made into the first wife of Adam. Adam, as you know, ostensibly was created from dirt, and Lilith too was created from dirt, whereas Eve was created from Adam's ribs. Well, one of Adam's ribs. And, well, Lilith was too willful. She wouldn't submit to Eve. You could see, you know, the age of this story kind of shows itself. So, yeah, it's quite a thing. Oh, actually, hang on, sorry, I just noticed some more messages. You'd love to be able to travel, but I just finished law college. Ah, yes, being a lawyer, my word. That's also going to be very difficult. I wish you good luck. I don't know about how the economy is going for that, but, you know, just generally try to do your best. From what I understand is that lawyers tend to be more sedentary. The profession tends to compel more sedentary stuff. Anyway, on to the second comment. Thinking about this condition as a curse and so on would result in a very nice plot for a book. Yes, thinking of vampirism as a curse is actually quite interesting. There was a... gosh, I can't remember, but there was a book that I read a while ago. Oh yeah, Skulduggery Pleasant, a child fantasy novel, sorry, teen fantasy novel that depicts vampires as sort of being these horrific, almost werewolf-like creatures that just massacre everyone around them. And that was a very interesting depiction of the vampire. In fact, the main character, also a girl. I should mention Skulduggery Pleasant was written by an Irish man. A very fun book. I would say it's quite nice. The main character, the female main character, protagonist, does sort of fall in love with one of the vampire characters, but then that becomes not much of a muchness by the end of it. Let me quickly show you Skulduggery Pleasant over here with my browser window. Let's go to that quickly. There you go, Skulduggery Pleasant. Let's make that nice and big. Very interesting and fun story. I have no idea why the Irish are such good novelists, but they tend to make some of the best stories. I suppose it started with James Joyce and just carried on from there. So yeah, the girl right in the fore of this image, you can see that is Valkyrie Kane. Of course Kane, because we're talking about religious apocrypha now. And she falls in love with the vampire at some point. It's a whole thing. But yeah, again, the curse is depicted as being something quite horrible in that. You know, something that you don't want. The problem is that after Anne Rice novels romanticized the whole vampire myth, they kind of lost the negative aspects to it. Not to mention the Twilight renditions, where the worst thing that a vampire suffers is that they sparkle in sunlight, which is, well, you know, I'll keep my criticism to myself. People are allowed to enjoy what they want, but I do think that was a silly cop-out to make the, you know, to basically remove any negative aspects of being a vampire. So, yeah. Oh, you're writing a fantasy novel. Okay, interesting. Well, all I can say is good luck. These, as you can see, these things get very complicated in how we classify them and define them, so if that is part of what you are writing about, good luck. But I hope some of my videos can inspire you, Sith. So, yeah. But going back, hello, Robin. My eyes are conking out. I'm quite tired. I spent the whole weekend making videos, so I'm having a bit of difficulty reading. But, yes, Robin. Yes, Robin. Yes, hello, Robin. And, what was I saying? Oh, yes, back to the vampires. So after Anne Rice came, you know, she turned these things into very romantic creatures. You know, it suddenly became desirable to be a vampire. You had to stay out of sunlight because you would die, but, you know, you get to do cool things. Because vampires, after that, became cool. And nowhere is this more evident than in the Twilight series or the Underworld series. Interestingly enough, the director for the Underworld series actually has a degree in genetic engineering. But although he does explain how the genes and DNA works very effectively, he fails to take into account the, well, basic thermodynamics. So you've got these tiny human beings turning into giant werewolves, and I'm left there wondering, where did all the mass come from? Where did the energy come from to change the person's shape? So, yeah. Oh dear, an issue on your end. Well, actually, yeah, I didn't get to ask everybody how the settings were for this. I am streaming at 1080, and you are looking at still images right now. Nothing is changing, but if there's any audio glitches or any visual glitches, please let me know. I tried to test this out a lot, and my noise gate before doing the stream kept giving me hassles. So I think I fixed it in time for this test stream, but I don't know. So please, if there's anything wrong, let me know. I'll see what I can do with the stuff loading on your end, but I suspect that this has mostly to do with no, I don't see anything here. I don't, everything that I can change, maybe this? I don't know, is it better now? Well, I think there's like 300 millisecond delay, so yeah. How do I think a vampiric animal would act and behave? Well, we've got a lot of examples of these creatures in real life. A lot of them are ambush predators. So, you know, most of the time they're parasites. Again, I'm going to continue, but do let me know if there's any problems with the stream. Most of the time the creatures are parasites. So think of like a tick, for example. These things just stick their legs out and then grab onto the first animal that comes by. The only vampires that actually, you know, attack people are vampire moths, vampire bats. Usually anything with the prefix vampire tends to be vampiric. You know, who would have thought it? And these creatures ambush animals in their sleep. So I imagine that a vampire would indeed be nocturnal if there was a real vampire, a human vampire. But in addition to that, they would most of the time wait for people to fall asleep. Like, they wouldn't try to seduce you. You must remember that the whole gosh, you know, I'm going to probably get in trouble with YouTube for saying this. Well, probably in trouble for the Lilith image anyway. The whole sexual aspect of the vampire comes from the negative sides, our negative relationship with sex and sexuality. So it's well, sorry, what I mean with that specifically is with disease and disease transmission through sexual acts, etc. And also the fact that sex is a very tempting thing. The vampire as a creature is supposed to be tempting to us, to want to pervert ourselves with interaction with it. So what's the easiest way for us to be tempted? Well, sex. Because, you know, it's difficult for us to fight such a basic urge. What's more is that the vampire would probably, well, be very small. You cannot, as I mentioned in the vampire video, you can't actually justify the energy requirements of an entire human being who is living off of blood. There's absolutely no calories in blood, zero. The vampire would probably have to have a diet in addition to blood. I don't know what they would get from blood, but it must be something. You can get some nutrients from blood, but not a lot. It's mostly just plasma. The majority of blood is plasma. I mean, let me see if I can quickly find a short visual illustration of blood. Blood contents. So yes, here we go. I found an image. Maybe this will come up. So here we go. Hopefully this loads. Okay, there we go. There we go. Oh no, I went to the website. I don't want to go to the website. I want to look at the image. Just the image. Okay. So here's the total volume of packed red blood cells, and we can see that red blood cells make up quite a large portion of, well, the blood. I see this person has written weird soup of added preservatives and metabolic byproducts of starving red blood cells. That makes me not like this image because it already shows me that I can't trust what the person's saying simply because they're not taking it seriously. But this should generally give you an idea of what is in blood. This is a nice image, but it's not, well, visually it's nice, but it's not very accurate. So let's see if I can find something else. Here we go. So here you go. Platelets, red blood cells, white blood cells, and plasma. And that's the majority of what's in blood. As you can see, literally half of it is just plasma. Plasma is, think of it as water in this case. It's a little bit more, well, it's a little bit more than that, but just think of it as water in this case. And white blood cells and red blood cells, although they do have protein, I mean, technically you could say that it's protein, it's not really nutritious. And as you know, you can't live entirely off of protein. You would have to try and get whatever food or nutrients you needed from whatever the red blood cells happen to be carrying at that time. So that's not the most efficient way of surviving. And as such, you cannot justify a human-sized vampire in the world. It would need to kill something like 3 or 4 people a day. I can't remember what I worked it out to be, but there would be a massive increase in the amount of murders in a country, and you know, it just would not be sustainable. Unless for some reason they were trying to get after some hormone or amino acid that they no longer synthesized, that could possibly justify it. Think of Jurassic Park. The creatures in Jurassic Park can't sustain themselves on their own. Their bodies don't produce lysine. As a consequence, they need to eat things that are rich in lysine. And in fact, eventually in the book, when they escape to the mainland, they tend to, well, they didn't tend, they destroyed all of the soy crops because soy is rich in lysine. So that was a thing that happened. And I suppose if you're going to make a vampire, you could possibly justify it along those lines. So I suppose maybe if you made it into like a, maybe as you say there, a Robert, not a Robert. I'm saying Robert because Robin is there, and I'm now combining Robin and Hobbit. It could possibly be Hobbit-sized. It would be definitely very, very diminutive, and I don't know what else it would have to consume. I'd need to actually spend some time and sit down and do the maths of how this thing would survive, but off the top of my head, I could say that if you want something that is humanoid, it would be incredibly small, smaller than a hobbit, in fact. A vampire bat. Let me show you how large these creatures are. Vampire bat. Vampire bat is incredibly small, and for some reason I don't see anybody with their hand near a vampire bat. Vampire bat size comparison. Let's see what happens here. Yeah. This creature is incredibly small. It's maybe the size of the person's hand, and that's including the wingspan as well. Blood is not a very nutritious source of food. And the larger bats, like the jackal, no, not the jackal bat, the red fox bat, the flying fox, this thing. This is a fruit bat. That is not a vampire bat. Yeah, from Peru. Okay, so actually, maybe, if you're in Brazil, I don't know, maybe, do you know, Mr. Gutenberg, if you get any kind of large fruit bats like this, the flying fox? Peru is rather nearby you. I don't imagine they migrate that far, but I don't know. Have you ever seen this animal before? If you're still on the stream, that is. Until everything updates on your end, I'm going to continue with the vampires. So yeah, again, tiny creatures. You can't really sustain this kind of animal in general, you know, a vampiric animal in general. So you could possibly make a tiny humanoid thing like this. It would be very weird and very creepy. Think of, ooh, actually that's a good idea. Think of like hundreds of tiny little pattering feet of vampiric monsters running through someone's house as they try to attack whoever lives there, rather than a single entity. Back in Africa, we have something called the Tokoloshe. And basically this thing is, well, it's a rather diminutive human being. This is really weird. This is a South African newspaper, The Citizen. It's as you can see, it sort of looks like a demon. Here it's a rather hairy thing. Again, for the sake of not annoying you, for the sake of not annoying YouTube, I'm not going to go into the details, but basically look at this image and you'll see that you can imagine what his supernatural power is. But generally back in Africa, a lot of the negative things, like vampires, well, not negative things, but supernatural things, are just dumped on this creature. So it can sometimes be a vampire, it can sometimes be a homunculus, it can be like a short, diminutive, cursed magician, it can be a demon. It's not really well defined, but again, from the image you should be able to tell what its main characteristic is and how it violates people. So I'll leave it at that. So yes, going back to Gusenberg, he says, no, there's no flying fox bat in Brazil. Okay, well, I was just wondering. I wonder if, I wonder where the vampire bats come from. The red flying fox bat lives in Indonesia. Okay, lives in Indonesia. Interesting. Well, yeah, I getting distracted again. Let's go back to the vampires. I was talking about Lilith. Getting too caught up in the excitement of the moment. So let's see here. Back to Lilith. So as I was saying, Lilith was Adam's first wife, made from sand, well, the same mud that he was made from, and is not actually a vampire. You see, she's a child thief, and I do concede to the comment over here that it is kind of the original vampire, but it's not actually. Sort of the idea behind the myth is that she was not submissive to Adam, and as a result Adam rejected her and God made Eve. Because Adam rejected her, she can't have children, so in her mind she doesn't want anyone to have children. Now, the Christian Lilith does come from a Babylonian myth, this creature, which does sort of, it's made, a lot of mentions are made of this thing. It's basically the progenitor of Lilith, and it was a vampire. This was actually a vampire, but it stole children and would drink their blood, if I recall. But again, Lilith was not necessarily the original vampire. It was these old Babylonian myths. So yeah, and again, Lilith was retroactively turned into a vampire. Originally she just stole children, and she's actually more of a demon, not a succubus. I originally thought she might have been a succubus, but she's actually just a demon that steals children and occasionally kills them. But again, she has been assigned various stuff, you know, various cultural things have been dumped on her, so yeah, so that's much, you know, that's that thing. I don't know how to finish that sentence. And finally, here we have actually an image of Adam rejecting Lilith, or trying to fight Lilith away. Again, you can see that Lilith isn't actually in any way vampiric. And in fact, the original vampires were more of a walking corpse. They were actually very similar to zombies, but they drank blood. Why did they drink blood? Because blood is the vital essence. In most religions, most spiritual places, you'll find that blood is considered, or even superstitious places, blood is considered to be very precious. Because of the logical, connection that you have no blood, you die. So blood is therefore life. I recall a rather unfortunate story in China. In an attempt to collect things like platelets and platelets and something else, the Chinese government went around to a lot of the more rural villages and, got people to donate blood. But the people didn't want to have blood removed from them because of their various beliefs. Now, what the Chinese government at the time did, they sort of took all the blood and put it in a big pile, in a big tank, and then returned it to the people afterwards. Obviously, the people were now getting just a mix of everybody else in the village's blood, and it wasn't really the healthiest thing to do, and it's caused quite a large outbreak of HIV in these areas. That's actually why I know about it. As I mentioned, I studied HIV. I had to study HIV as part of becoming a teacher. So, yeah, in Africa, we have to know how to counsel HIV-infected people, so, yay. But, again, that's why blood is very important, why the vampire zombie drank blood. Not necessarily to sustain itself, but because it was draining your vital essence, what made you alive. So, yeah, very interesting. And then finally, I put this image in just because I like Faust. Here's Lilith attempting to tempt Faust. If any of you haven't read Faust, it's a book by an old German guy called Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and Faust basically makes a deal with the devil, kind of thing. Well, what happens is that, like in the Book of Job, Mephistopheles, in the English version, I haven't read the German version, Mephistopheles goes to God and says, "Yo, God, Faust is really weird. I bet he's actually quite a bad cat." And I don't know why I'm talking like this, but God says no. God replies that Faust is going to come to God eventually, but that he's going to do it by a very strange and intricate way. And Mephistopheles then says to God, "Well, I'm sure that his strange and intricate way will lead him ultimately down a negative path. Allow me to tempt him, and you'll see that he doesn't come back to you." And God, being a gambler as he is, then says, "Okay, sure." Just like Job, he does that. Yes, yo God. And Faust, basically, it's actually quite a sad story. I don't want to spoil it because it's an old book, but I don't want to spoil the ending because I want people to read the story, or at least maybe listen to an audiobook. So, yeah, that's a thing. And that's Lilith, tempting God. So, was there anything else? No, I don't think there was anything else. That was it. That was all I had prepared for this entire stream. And how long has it been? My word, it's been an hour and a half. I'm surprised at the amount of content that I can produce with a stream. This took about, for the assets, to create all of the assets, it took about 5 hours. Then to prepare the stream, another 2 hours. I know, it looks like very little, but actually this was quite a lot of work. And finally the stream is 1.5 hours, which actually, compared to the Beastiary videos, this is, minute for minute, this is a lot better. So, I don't know, those of you who are still in the chat, and those of you who will eventually be in the comments if you watch this later, let me know what you think. I definitely will do more of these. I am planning one that is based on the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Now, I've mentioned that I don't want to criticize magic too much, or mention magic just yet, because I'm saving my logic of magic for the fairy video that I had promised to Savannah. But there is a lot of problems with the way magic, or at least the rules of magic in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them story. And not even just magic, just like simple biology. Like, a lot of things don't make sense. So I'm going to be running over that. I have no idea how long that stream will be, but judging by this, it could be quite a while. Obviously, if I'm fortunate and more people attend that stream, I will be able to speak, you know, give less personal talking to of the people in the comments. Mostly because otherwise the stream will go for several hours. You know, this I was honestly expecting this to take like maybe 30 minutes, and here we are. So yeah, that's pretty much that. You guys in the chat, do you have any questions or any other comments that you would like to give before I close everything off? I did a whole closing video, so that's an impressive thing. It's going to be terrible. I hope I got the sound mixing right, because I don't want to ruin anyone's ears. So if you're listening on a headset, I don't know how this is going to turn out, the credits, but you might want to check the volume first, and yeah. Oh, I also hope that you enjoyed listening to me me waffling in a rather less scripted and less confident manner than I usually am in. What do I think of the amphitheater? Amphitheater? I have no idea what an amphitheater is. Amphitheater. I would ask you to elaborate, but due to the delay in the chat and the video, I think it would save time. This is an amphitheater. Interesting. Browser window. Fade 2. The amphitheater seems to be some kind of flying creature. So, okay, I see. So it's a type of dragon with no legs, only wings. You know, let's just cheat quickly. Okay. It's on a draconology kind of thing. You know, this makes me think of the Pokemon, Dragonite or Dragonair. I'm going to cheat and go to Wikipedia. I don't like going to Wikipedia, but let's see, amphitheater. Winged serpent. Okay, so it's a winged serpent, it seems. I wonder if there isn't any kind of... Okay, it just takes me to dragon. I wonder if there's any kind of religious connection to this, because I can't recall off the top of my head if the... if the snake in the Garden of Eden had wings. I know he had legs. They say it's similar to a lindworm. And much like similar to wyverns. No. Okay. I didn't know about this thing. Thank you for telling me. So yeah. Okay, well we'll definitely do that. On that note, though, thank you for mentioning the stuff. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your comments. And I think it's been an hour and a half. I don't want to keep any of you guys awake, and I've got stuff to do. So I'll see you guys in the future. Let's see how my stuff works. I'm going to end the chat. I'm going to end everything else. See you in the next stream. Bye-bye, everyone.